I took out massive loans for college while my parents paid for my sister's tuition. Now they want 50K from me, and I refused. 18 months later, my pregnancy revealed a shocking truth about my family. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my parents, especially my mom, 58F. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, our family seemed picture perfect from the outside. Hardworking dad, devoted homemaker mom, and 2 daughters. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. From as early as I can remember, it was clear that my younger sister, Betty, 29F, was the golden child. She was born when I was 3, and I still have vivid memories of being shuffled off to my grandparents' house for weeks while my mom focused all her attention on the new baby. At first, I thought it was just because Betty was little and needed more care. But as the years went by, the pattern continued. Betty excelled in academics and sports from an early age. She was reading chapter books by kindergarten, winning spelling bees in elementary school, and dominating on the soccer field by middle school. I, on the other hand, struggled with dyslexia that went undiagnosed until I was 12. My parents, particularly my mom, saw my difficulties as laziness rather than a learning disability. I vividly remember sitting at the kitchen table in tears, trying to read aloud from my 4th-grade history textbook while my mom grew increasingly frustrated. "Why can't you just focus?" she'd snap. "Betty never has trouble with her reading." It was a refrain I'd hear countless times over the years. While Betty brought home straight A's and sports trophies, I found my passion in art and music. I spent hours sketching in my room or playing my secondhand guitar. But these pursuits were seen as frivolous by my parents. When I proudly showed my mom a portrait I'd drawn of our family dog, she barely glanced at it before asking if I'd finished my math homework. The favoritism extended far beyond academics. Every year, Betty got new clothes for school shopping, while I got hand-me-downs or thrift store finds. She had the latest gaming consoles and phones, while I made do with outdated technology. For her 16th birthday, my parents surprised Betty with a brand new car, a shiny red Volkswagen Beetle. When my 16th birthday rolled around a few years earlier, I'd received a used bike from the neighbor's garage sale. I remember confronting my mom about the unfairness when I was 17. We were in the kitchen, and I had just been told I couldn't go on the school trip to France because it was too expensive, even though Betty had gone on a similar trip the year before. When I pointed out the double standard, my mom's face hardened. "Well," she said coldly, "when you start bringing home grades like Betty's, maybe you'll deserve nice things too." My dad, 60M, wasn't as openly critical as my mom, but his silence was almost worse. He was always buried in his work as an accountant, leaving the child rearing primarily to my mom. When I'd try to talk to him about the unfair treatment, he'd just shrug and say, "Your mother knows best." His passive enabling was, in many ways, as hurtful as my mom's active favoritism. The real kicker came when it was time for college. My parents paid Betty's full tuition to an expensive private university in California. She got a tearful send-off, complete with a new laptop and dorm accessories. When it was my turn to apply to schools, I was told matter-of-factly that they'd already spent too much on Betty's education, and I'd have to figure it out myself. I ended up taking out massive loans to attend the state university an hour from our hometown. Those college years were tough. While Betty posted photos of beach parties and spring break trips, I worked 2 part-time jobs just to afford textbooks and ramen noodles. But it was also during this time that I really came into my own. Away from my parents' constant comparisons, I thrived in my art classes and even had a few pieces displayed in student showcases. After graduation, I made the difficult decision to move across the country to New York to pursue my art career. It was scary leaving everything I knew behind, but I felt suffocated in my hometown, always living in Betty's shadow. I limited contact with my family to occasional phone calls and obligatory holiday visits. Meanwhile, Betty followed the path my parents had always envisioned. She stayed close to home, got a job at a prestigious law firm, married her college sweetheart at 24, and had her first child by 26. My parents doted on their grandchildren and constantly pestered me about when I was going to settle down and start a real family. They seemed oblivious to the fact that I was building a life I loved, even if it didn't fit their narrow definition of success. 5 years ago, I met my now husband, Matthew, 34M, at an art gallery opening. He's been incredibly supportive of my career and encouraged me to set better boundaries with my family. When we got married last year, we opted for a small artistic ceremony in a sculpture garden. My parents and Betty attended, but they spent most of the time criticizing our unconventional choices, like my colorful dress and our food truck catering, rather than celebrating with us. Now, here's where the current situation comes in. Last month, my dad called out of the blue. At first, I thought maybe someone was sick or there was some kind of emergency. But no, apparently their retirement savings took a big hit in the stock market crash, and they're struggling financially. Betty and her husband are having money troubles of their own due to some failed investments, so they can't help much. My dad asked if Matthew and I could lend them $50,000 to help them get back on their feet. I was absolutely stunned. After years of favoritism and financial support for Betty, they have the audacity to ask me for money? I told my dad I'd think about it and talk to Matthew, but internally I was seething. When I explained the situation to Matthew later that night, he was furious on my behalf. He pointed out that we've worked hard for our savings, and a lot of it is earmarked for fertility treatments we're planning to start soon. We've been trying to conceive for over a year with no luck, and the emotional and financial stress of that journey has been significant. Matthew said it's not our responsibility to bail my parents out, especially given our history. I agree with Matthew, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't conflicted. Despite everything, there's still a part of me that craves my parents' approval and love. A tiny voice in my head whispers that maybe if I help them now, they'll finally see my worth. But a louder, more rational part knows that's unlikely to happen. After a few days of mulling it over, I called my dad back and told him we couldn't afford to help them right now. I tried to be gentle but firm, explaining that our own financial situation was tight due to the fertility treatments. My mom got on the phone and started guilt-tripping me immediately. She said I was being selfish and ungrateful and that family should always come first. She brought up how they supported me through college, by which she meant co-signing my loans, which I'm still paying off, and said I owed them. When she started in on how Betty would help if she could, I lost my cool. I told her that maybe if they'd treated me fairly growing up, I'd be more inclined to help now. Betty called me later that day, absolutely furious. She said I was being petty and holding on to childhood grudges. She accused me of abandoning our parents in their time of need and said I should be ashamed of myself. When I tried to remind her of all the advantages she'd been given over the years, she dismissed it as ancient history and said I needed to grow up. I ended up hanging up on her. Now my whole family is mad at me. My parents are sending guilt-tripping texts daily, ranging from passive-aggressive, I guess we know who we can really count on, to outright manipulative. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of this stress. I hope you're happy. Betty and her husband are bad-mouthing me to our extended family, painting me as a selfish, ungrateful daughter who's abandoning her parents in their time of need. Even some aunts and uncles have reached out to express their disappointment in me. They don't know the full history, of course. My parents have always been good at maintaining their perfect family image to the outside world. Matthew says I did the right thing and that I don't owe them anything. He's been amazingly supportive, even offering to field calls from my family to give me a break from the stress. But I can't help feeling conflicted. Am I being petty? Should I just give them the money to keep the peace? Or am I right to stand my ground after years of unfair treatment? I feel like I'm going crazy with all the guilt and second-guessing. So, Reddit, I need some outside perspective. AI tough for refusing to help my parents financially after years of favoritism towards my sister? Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and to say a lot has happened would be an understatement. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain perspective on the situation and gave me the strength to stand my ground. After my initial refusal to help, my parents doubled down on their guilt-tripping tactics. They started calling multiple times a day, leaving long voicemails about how I was breaking their hearts and tearing the family apart. My mom even went so far as to say that my refusal to help was causing my dad's health to deteriorate. It was emotionally exhausting. Things escalated when my mom showed up at my workplace unannounced one day. I work at a small art gallery in Brooklyn, and I was in the middle of giving a tour to some potential buyers when I saw her walk in. My heart dropped to my stomach. She made a beeline for me, ignoring my polite requests to wait until I was finished. In front of my colleagues and clients, she started ranting about what an ungrateful daughter I was and how I was abandoning them in their time of need. It was humiliating and infuriating. My boss had to ask her to leave, and I spent the rest of the day hiding in the back room, mortified. That night, Matthew suggested we take a step back and go no contact for a while to clear our heads. We blocked their numbers and social media accounts, which gave us some much-needed peace. However, they then started reaching out to our friends and my in-laws, trying to get messages to us. It felt like we were being stalked. The situation came to a head 2 weeks ago. We were at a local art fair where I was exhibiting some of my work. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and I was feeling optimistic. I'd already sold a few pieces and was chatting with the potential buyer when I spotted my parents and Betty approaching my booth. I immediately tensed up, but Matthew, who was helping me that day, squeezed my hand reassuringly. My mom started off with fake pleasantries, complimenting my art in a way that felt backhanded. "Oh, how interesting," she said, eyeing an abstract piece. I suppose there's a market for everything these days. Then she launched into her usual spiel about family obligation and how desperate their situation was. Betty chimed in, saying I was being cruel and heartless. That's when Matthew stepped in. In all the years I've known him, I've never seen him so angry. He calmly but firmly told them that their behavior was unacceptable, and that if they couldn't respect our boundaries, we'd have no choice but to get a restraining order. My dad looked shocked, while my mom and Betty sputtered indignantly. Seeing Matthew stand up for me gave me courage. I found my voice and told them that years of favoritism and emotional abuse had consequences. I said I was done being manipulated, and that if they ever wanted a relationship with me in the future, they needed to take a long, hard look at their behavior and get professional help. They left in a huff, but not before my mom hissed that I'd regret this when they were old and dying. It was painful, but I also felt a weird sense of relief at finally standing up for myself. The aftermath has been mixed. Some extended family members who initially sided with my parents have reached out to apologize after hearing my side of the story. My Aunt Sarah, my mom's sister, called me in tears. She said she had no idea things were so bad and apologized for not seeing it sooner. That conversation was healing in a way I didn't expect. Others are still giving me the cold shoulder. My cousin Mark, who's always been close to Betty, sent me a scathing email about loyalty and family obligation. I chose not to respond. Betty sent a long, rambling email a week after the art fair incident. She accused me of exaggerating our childhood and claimed she had it hard too because of the pressure to be perfect. She said I was selfish for not helping our parents, and that I was jeopardizing her children's future by not ensuring our parents had a stable retirement. It was clear she still didn't get it. On a personal note, Matthew and I have decided to move forward with our fertility treatments. We're excited about potentially starting our own family, one built on love and equal treatment. The process is daunting, but it feels good to be taking positive steps towards our future. I've also started seeing a therapist to work through some of my lingering issues from childhood. It's been challenging to unpack years of emotional baggage, but I already feel like I'm making progress. My therapist has been helping me recognize patterns of manipulation and giving me tools to set healthy boundaries. Work has been a mixed bag. The scene my family caused at the art fair actually led to increased interest in my work. Apparently drama sells. I've sold several major pieces in the last few weeks, but I'm also dealing with the lingering embarrassment from the incident at the gallery. My boss has been understanding, but I can't help feeling like my professional reputation has been tarnished. I still have moments of doubt and guilt, especially late at night when the house is quiet and my mind starts to wander. Did I do the right thing? Am I being too harsh? But overall, I feel like I'm on the right path. Setting firm boundaries with my family of origin has been difficult but necessary. For now, I'm focusing on building a life and support system with people who truly care about me, not what I can do for them. It's a work in progress, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and things have settled into a new normal. We've maintained our no-contact stance with my parents and Betty, which has been both liberating and challenging. There are days when I feel light and free, and others when the weight of family estrangement hits hard. The fertility treatments we started have been emotionally and physically taxing. The hormone injections make me feel like a pincushion, and the mood swings are intense. There have been moments of hope followed by crushing disappointment. But through it all, Matthew has been my rock. He's there with ice packs after injections. He holds me when the pregnancy tests come back negative, and he reminds me to stay hopeful. We're cautiously optimistic about our chances of conceiving, but we're also exploring adoption as an option. Last month, we received a certified letter from my parents. I was hesitant to open it, fearing more guilt-tripping or threats. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. To my surprise, it contained a formal apology. They acknowledged their favoritism and the hurt it caused me. They said they've started seeing a family therapist to work on their issues and hoped that someday we could rebuild our relationship. The letter felt surreal. Part of me wanted to believe it was genuine, while another part was deeply skeptical. I've been down this road before. My mom would occasionally apologize after a big fight, only to revert to her old behavior within days. I showed the letter to my own therapist, who advised caution and reminded me that true change takes time and consistent effort. After much deliberation, I decided to respond with a brief email. I thanked them for the apology and told them I was glad they were getting help. However, I made it clear that I wasn't ready to resume contact and that any future relationship would depend on their continued efforts to change and respect my boundaries. Betty hasn't reached out directly, but I heard through a cousin that she and her husband are also in counseling. Apparently, our confrontation at the art fair made her realize some hard truths about our family dynamics. I'm not sure how to feel about this information. Part of me hopes she's genuinely working on herself, but I'm wary of getting my hopes up. On a brighter note, my art career has been taking off. The publicity from the scene my family caused at the fair actually led to increased interest in my work. I've sold several major pieces and have been commissioned for a public mural in our city. It's a dream come true, but it also comes with its own set of pressures. I find myself working long hours, trying to capitalize on this momentum while it lasts. Matthew and I have been using this time to focus on strengthening our own little family unit. We've been having deep conversations about our values and how we want to raise our future children. We're both committed to creating a home environment that's the opposite of what I experienced growing up, one filled with unconditional love, support, and open communication. We've also been working on building a stronger support network. We've been spending more time with friends who feel like family, and I've reconnected with a few cousins who reached out after hearing about the situation with my parents. It feels good to be surrounded by people who accept and value me for who I am. There have been challenging moments too. The holidays were particularly tough. It was the first Thanksgiving and Christmas we didn't spend with my family, and the absence was palpable. We ended up hosting a Friendsgiving with other people who couldn't be with their families, which helped ease the loneliness. While the situation with my family is still unresolved, I feel more at peace than I have in years. I'm learning that it's okay to prioritize my own well-being, and that setting boundaries doesn't make me a bad person. The future feels uncertain but full of possibilities. I still have days where I question my decisions, where I miss the idea of a close-knit family. But then I remind myself of how far I've come and the healthier relationships I'm building. It's a process, and I'm taking it one day at a time. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and life has taken some unexpected turns. The biggest news is that our fertility treatments were successful. I'm pregnant with twins. Matthew and I are over the moon, but also a bit terrified at the prospect of 2 babies at once. The first trimester was rough with morning sickness and fatigue, but now in my second trimester, I'm feeling much better. The pregnancy news brought up a lot of complicated feelings about family. As we started preparing for the babies, I found myself wishing I could share the joy with my parents and Betty, despite our issues. After much discussion with Matthew and my therapist, I decided to send them a brief email announcing the pregnancy. I made it clear that this wasn't an invitation to resume full contact, but rather a gesture of cautious optimism. Their responses were surprisingly mature. My parents sent a heartfelt congratulations and reiterated their commitment to changing their behavior. They asked if they could send a gift for the babies, which I agreed to after some hesitation. Betty's reply was shorter but sincere, expressing happiness for us and hope for reconciliation in the future. We're taking things very slowly. I've had a few short phone calls with my parents, always with clear boundaries set beforehand. They seem to be genuinely trying to respect my limits, which is encouraging. They haven't pushed for visits or tried to overstep, which is a big change from their past behavior. Betty and I have exchanged a few texts, mostly about the pregnancy and her kids. It's stilted and a bit awkward, but it's a start. The pregnancy has also brought up some fears for me. I'm terrified of repeating my parents' mistakes or showing favoritism to one twin over the other. Matthew and I have been reading parenting books and attending classes, determined to break the cycle of dysfunction. We've had long talks about our parenting philosophies and how to create a loving, equitable environment for both babies. As for our financial situation, the success of my art career has been a blessing. The mural commission led to more high-profile projects, and I've even had a small showing at a respected gallery in Manhattan. We've been able to save for the babies and even set aside a small emergency fund for my parents, should they truly need it in the future. It feels good to be in a position of strength rather than obligation. The pregnancy has forced me to slow down and take better care of myself, which has been a valuable lesson in self-care. I'm learning to say no to projects that don't align with my values or energy levels, and to prioritize my health and well-being. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of our family relationships. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm under no illusions that everything will magically be perfect. But I feel like we're on a path towards healing, even if it's a long and winding one. For now, Matthew and I are focused on preparing for the arrival of our little ones and building the kind of loving, supportive family we both always wanted. We've been setting up the nursery, choosing names, and imagining what life will be like with 2 newborns. It's exciting and terrifying all at once, but I'm grateful for this new chapter in our lives.